See that thing up top? It all,
Okay, yeah, we're blinking too.
yeah. It always turns up a notch. It's like first pitch. You know what I mean, Zing?
Batter up, baby.
Yeah,
Home now. Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah. It's kind of like how we're gonna. It's like kind of how we're gonna work the counts here early. Just kind of work the plate a little bit, find our stuff. We just got to get into a rhythm. It's like the first inning when you get in when you see the countdown go.
Look, get ahead, mix it up, put them away. We'll say, all right, now.
So before we press play, I got yeah. Is that a Yoda coffee mug? I noticed that, dude.
It's so happy.
When you before I pressed play and you grabbed a sip of that, I was like, that guy's got a Yoda coffee mug in his hand. And the thing is, I'll just go on record early and get it out of the way. But I've literally been a fan of yours and wanted to be friends with you for over a decade. You don't even,
Oh, wow.
and you didn't even know it. So seeing a Yoda mug is epic. No, I say that because, and I told you this a little bit in Arizona a couple weeks ago, whenever that was, because years ago, I was with the Brewers. I was in Appleton, and then you signed with the Brewers, right? We were kind of talking about this.
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah, and that was not, I'm 35 and I was probably 20. I was old in the A ball. I was probably like 2014, you said. So that would have been my second year. So I'd have probably been like 24, 25 maybe. But you signed and sort of became like a living legend in the organization, especially where I was at. And yeah, man. So that was kind of my first like introduction to you. I'm excited to ask you a little bit about that story, but because you had a crazy story getting into that year, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of topics. But that was the first time that I was introduced to the legend through mythical stories at the time. But yeah, I mean, I really admired your path, and then I've obviously know a bunch of dudes who have worked with you for many years, so I've heard so many stories. But this is a long time coming for me, and that's all I wanted to go on record and say that.
Oh, I love that. That excites me. The lens I had on it was probably completely different at the time, where it was, you know, 34 years old going to the Florida State League, and yeah, wow, what a spin back. That was fun.
Well, think about it. So I'm 35 now, so you got to think that was essentially you were my age then, and you were going to
I
the
was
Florida State
34.
League.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so I mean, what it's very evident to, and I'm just getting to know you, so always stop me if I'm off on my projections and observations. It's hard not to have that when you're first starting to meet somebody, but it seems very
Sure.
evident that you actually and absolutely love the art of pitching.
That's a great way to say.
Yeah,
Yes, especially the art.
yeah, it feels like that to me, and I feel like I've been around so. I mean, obviously we've been around so many athletes our whole lives, but there's something different, and I felt that when I was at your spot a couple weeks ago, instantly. But that's sort of what I saw from afar for the last couple of years, and I know that we've been in and out of pro sports, know a lot of people in pro baseball specifically, but there's something to just the aspect of art and not looking at it as can I be a Cy Young or do I get this paycheck or I get the contract or whatever it is, whatever it's supposed to be through society. There's something about your relationship to the artistic side of pitching that seems felt very rare to me, especially of all the people I've been around in baseball my whole life. So I don't have a question to that. I just have to tell you that I've observed that, and I would love if you just spoke on beyond on what you feel towards what you're hearing me say.
Well, I mean, I would say that I feel like I got seen, like somebody saw me like for who I am in that way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because so much of it does get lost, especially in the science of the game now, the mechanics or the pitch design or all these other categories where yes, at the truest, the most joyful place that I can go, it's art. And we're coaching humans,
Yeah.
not robots. And I think that's an important piece too, because I think a lot of guys feel like they're being coached like robots
Mm.
when you're throwing messages at them and you know perfect deliveries and certain stuff. Where I was talking to a dad this morning about a certain company that does like mechanics, basically, we'll just say. And how I told him, well, if we went into the forest and we were looking at trees, are they all going to look exactly the same? And there's going to be different types of trees. There's going to be oaks and maples and, birch and beech trees and all these different ones. And it's like, if we expect them all to be the same, we're really missing out on the true, like you're saying, art, the uniqueness that I think is what makes guys special.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love that I'm literally staring at a bunch of trees right in front of me. And one of the things that I think is so beautiful, see, I'm into the nervous system and I'm into the art of the nervous system. And I know you are too. I just look at it as like we obviously get categorized in some sort of a profession. But the powerful part about nature and trees is its complexity. I mean, that literally downshifts you as a human. Like you start to adapt and you shift into restful states because of its complexity and the fractals of trees and those sort of things. And so then if I were to think, and this is, I'm going to throw this at you, if I were to think to myself, well, what does adaptation mean to me as a person? It comes out in the form of creativity. If I'm in a position where I can be adaptive, I start to create and be uniquely myself. I think that's why people get such downloads when they're in nature. But if you take what you just said about that, what's one of the ways as a coach, how do you teach people, or what is some of the ways that you kind of strategize or put, I don't know, however you do it in your way, to get people to feel comfortable being themselves or being the complexity, metaphorically, like the tree, to just grow and learn who they are?
I think part of it starts with just holding space, where it's like being that, so that they can allow themselves to be that. Where it's like, a lot of times, probably the best compliment I can get, other than like the way you just spoke about me, was like people will come in and they'll be like, wow, I watch your social media, it's really cool, but it's nothing like what I see in person. There's so much more robustness. It's so more, we peel back the onion. There's so many more layers versus I think there's a lot of things that let's say, look like trees out there, but you'd go up to them and you'd push them over because they have no roots. We got a lot of guys online that think they're experts because they watched a YouTube video or they took a weekend accreditation, and then they think they have everything figured out with each guy. And I think that's part of where you lose guys too, is if you think that you already know. Like as they come in, if they come in and you're already saying something 2 pitches in, that tells me you had a preconceived notion. Versus I like to feel like I'm starting with a blank slate, with an athlete the first time, but also even on a daily basis, where it's like I want to take out as many of the biases as I can to allow them just to be who they are versus what they think they should be, or what this guy told them they were, or this coach told them they could be. And it's like, well, let's meet you right where you're at right now. And then I think a lot of it starts for me with like pitching. It's like, okay, do you have a pre-pitch routine? How do you see your pitches versus how do you throw them? Like, what does a good pitch look like versus how do I throw a good pitch?
Do you want that to be definitive as an answer?
No, because I think it can change, like in a situation where it's like, hey, there's men on second and third. A good pitch looks different than there's nobody on, nobody out,
Right.
first pitch of the game.
Right.
And I think that's the fun part about, nature too, where it's like you go out, you talk about adapting or problem solving, or, I'll take guys on a hike and, we'll look for places to play catch. And a lot of times it's like up in Sedona we go, there's these trees that, they thin out the forest and they lay them down, and there's like 75 foot of a tree laying on the ground. So like we'll go stand on it and throw, and it's like, oh, what if you stand like this, or you stand like this, or there's just different ways to kind of adapt to that environment. Or you have a rock here and a rock here, and then there's open space. How are you going to create some roots there so you can flick a biscuit down there, huh, now?
Just drop it. Oh my gosh, dude, you just took me out of my that's beautiful. I love that. I think like, well, so because you're using T Willie, shout out to Taylor Williams. He was my roommate back in the day.
Yeah,
And
throwing 95 last week in Mexico, baby. Let's
come
go.
on, good for T Willie.
First outing.
Yeah, I
First
love
outing.
that. You know, and I know you guys used to go back up, or you guys probably still do, I'm sure, but you would go up to Sedona. He was probably one of the first guys that put me onto that with you. What was sort of the calling in your own life? What was the thing that called you to experiment and train in those environments? Like when did that start entering you?
So I have a good buddy. His name's Mark Friends. He lives between San Diego and Knoxville right now, or Nashville. But he had this idea of working out in nature, manimals,
Mm,
and it was just different things where it was like we would adapt, and then we would become that. And I think for me, I grew up that way.
yeah.
So like if I gave you videos of me training back in like even when I was younger, a lot of it's out in nature. Like I grew up in Michigan, so I had an issue with my hands. And when I was throwing in cold weather, I couldn't feel my fingers, supposedly. So that off season, I went home and I was making piles of snowballs. And I had a tire against a tree down a pit. And I told myself they were fireballs. They weren't snowballs because I had to take my brain to a different
Yeah.
place to
Yeah.
get. And I was like, well, what if it's slippery? Nobody cares. When you're in a game, nobody cares what the elements are. They want to see a good pitch still, right?
Right.
So it was like that was just part of I guess maybe some of the madness, but the ways to use nature to challenge yourself too. And then it's like for me, a hill is the ultimate humbler,
Mm.
right? Like think you're a bad dude, go run up that hill a few times.
Mm.
Go crawl, go backwards bear crawl up there and see what you have to become to get that task done.
Mm.
You might have to make some noises. You might have to dig down and do something that, your brain for a second's like wants you to quit, and you're like, no.
Hmm. Do you
So
have?
I think he kind of pushed me in that direction, but then I think we just went full send. Really, 2006, I think was probably about that time.
When you committed?
Yeah, and I think just went all the way that way because I had what was supposed to be a career-ending arm injury in 2004, and I had 5 surgeons tell me I'd never pitch again. So it was like the idea of what Western medicine had to say was kind of like out the door for me at that point.
Yeah.
And it was more I started to study martial arts, and I started to study things that were, I mean, those people purposely break their bodies down to make them harder.
Yeah.
And it was like, and here I was being told I was never going to pitch again, which was one of those things that I was just unwilling to accept.
Yeah. I mean, even now, right? I mean, the first thing you were doing when I was with you was pitching. You just picked up a ball and started pitching.
I just 4 innings the other night.
Congrats, man. Good for you. I mean, what's your relationship with that in time then? You think about yourself in age and in science and what society tells us as when you're supposed to be good. I mean, how I don't even know if this is real, but my whole life you just always heard 27 is the time that you're your best as a baseball player. I think that's like the age they give you. What's your relationship with just those constructs?
So one of my favorite quotes of all time, Satchel Paige: "Age is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter." And I think a lot of that too, once again, to kind of touch the martial arts piece,
Yeah.
but my Sifu Patrick Curtis, when we're working out, and he's 10 years older than I am, and he's working out with us and other guys that are younger, and it's like when he's able to do more and go beyond what I can see at, let's say, a 24-year-old, I think my lens changed, and it wasn't so much age, it was more energy. And then I think it's you meet certain people and it's like, okay, yes, the clock might say that dude's 60, but his energy is like
Right.
full bore, versus I've met people who are 18 and have no energy,
Right.
and it's like they're merely a shadow of what they could be.
Have you had times in your life where you had no energy?
I would say definitely during my rehab process was probably the hardest days for me with that.
How so?
There was
Yeah.
about, because I went from, I think because my identity was so wrapped up in the game,
Mm.
and I think even my purpose was so wrapped up that it was like that the only thing that defined me was that little white ball,
Yeah.
instead of the fact that I just got pure joy from it and I get to do it versus like, wasn't that I had to do it, but I just was so used to it. And it was just, you go to college and you play and you go into pro ball and you play and you have so much identity into that. And I think that got completely shattered by my injury. And I had to learn these things existed outside the game too, I think. Whereas like my lens was just so baseball, 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 baseball.
Yeah, but that's where I think inspires me now, but also intrigues me as of how you still play baseball. Like you still are a baseball player. And that person now, I would imagine, is entirely different, obviously, in objectively in age, but then in thought as well. And it's like
I would say
the
the
joy.
joy piece. hmm Whereas like before, it was like I thought I could just work, 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 and it was like it wasn't just the work, right?
Yeah. Do you feel
It was more what the work made me become.
mm,
It was like how you talk about like the adapting, where it's like it never gets easier, you just get better. And it's like you keep doing that path and you keep following that path, and it's like all of a sudden it's like you get comfortable being uncomfortable, and then you're dangerous.
do you think like how do you think as a teacher, do you think that you can like cuz you essentially want people to have that, right? You want everyone to have joy. How do you think do you think that's an individual path, or do you think that teachers can impact others to get to that quicker?
I mean, I think if we can kind of, I like to think of it like the candle.
Mhm.
Like if I have a candle and it's burning and you have a candle that's not burning, I can light your candle.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, the wind may blow it out, it might be an injury, might be an organization, might be, the things that can be the stealers of joy, comparison. A lot of times when we talk about comparison being the thief of joy, it's
Sure.
like when I back to the trees, we got that oak tree out in the woods. Is it staring at the maple tree? Is it jealous of being a maple tree?
Mm.
Or just happy to be an oak tree? And
And just be.
I think, yeah, just be. And I think if we can exemplify, I really feel as a coach that if we exemplify things, guys can do them a lot quicker. Like even, let's say a guy's quiet. We get this a lot with young kids. He's quiet and he's whatever. And it's like, if I can just start to make some noises, like let's say I make a pterodactyl noise, and I'm like, okay, this is what a pterodactyl sounds like.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, and then I'm like, okay, well, what animal can you make a noise like?
Mm.
And it's like just little things where it's like it can take you outside of those, not necessarily comfort zones, but those constraints of what's acceptable. Maybe it's not okay to be a pterodactyl in your math class, but it's okay to be one on the baseball field.
Nice. I like that a lot.
It's like the time and place thing, right? Where it's like I'm raising a young man right now. He's 15 years old, and it's like there's certain times where there's such a fine line between the comfort and the uncomfortable, where it's like you want to provide things for them, but at the same time you want to allow them to struggle,
Right.
because the struggle is where they have growth.
Mhm.
And I think like with the athletes, when we're talking about the joy, it's like a lot of times the things that pull them away from the joy are things outside of their control.
Mm.
So it's like once we start going back to the idea of, okay, what do I have control over, which is very little,
Mhm.
right? It's like once I kind of take out that outside noise, now all of a sudden it's like I can feel that joy, and hopefully it's something that others can feel by being around you. And then I think it's pretty highly contagious.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you mentioned earlier meeting people where they're at. I think a viewpoint that you have that's got to be really positively just off the same concept that you're talking about is you do work with an extremely wide range of people from ages. So when you think of like the ability to change gears or whatever, shift hats metaphorically, it's like how do you meet a 15-year-old, either one you're raising or coaching? How do you meet a 12-year-old, and then how do you meet a 35-year-old or a 25-year-old? Like what's just your takeaway overarching of how you meet people where they're at in comparison to what you're saying?
I think a lot of times it's going to start with listening,
Hmm.
where it's like maybe questions versus like I think a lot of times coaches feel like And I think young coaches, especially, they feel like, hey, we're here to provide answers.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think the longer I've coached, the more it's like guided self discovery, where it's like instead of me stepping through the door first, it's like I might walk you up to the doorway, but you're the one. And I think sometimes being okay with saying, we'll figure this out versus like, this is the answer. Because it's problem solving a lot of times, right?
Right.
You were talking about that the other day, and I with sound bowls and some of the stuff where it's like, I love the frequencies, and I have some stuff right over here that's right up your alley. But
Nice.
I think when we get back into, I guess, the coaching realm, it's like being open to, yes, there's things that we understand and patterns that we see and things we know, but there's also a lot of things that are unknown. And I tend to be very intrigued by the unknown, and more attracted to it, I guess, too, because I think it leaves space for new things.
Yeah.
And it's like success does leave clues. We've seen that, right? Where it's like this, and this. However, there's a lot of other ways that could be successful we've yet to see.
Well, I think that you said this right away too, right? Like the art. Let's just think of it as the subjective and objective, or the science and the art. Do you feel like? Do you feel like we've gone? Just I know specifically in sports, we can stay on sports, it's fine. But it's do you feel like because we're so afraid of the unknown that we have just continuously gravitated towards this science based, objective, analytical concept to essentially just hopefully just dismantle any uncertainty that we are supposed to have as a human? Do you feel like that's just our natural human nature and it's just gotten so radical?
Well, I think especially, yeah, I mean, if you look at the highest levels of the game, like, yes, because it's protecting people.
Right.
Where it's like, if this guy has all these metrics and he has all this stuff, and you sign him as an organization or as a scout or whatever lens you want to put yourself in,
Yeah.
there's security there because that's something that's been done before. Versus the unknown might be somebody that throws a little bit different, or they expel certain beliefs that we've been taught about how you're supposed to do things. And I think it's yeah, it's part of the space that we're in, right? Where it's like we're allowed to deal with the individual versus, I get guys a lot that ask me why I work in the private sector versus
And
for an
org.
organization.
Right.
And although there's parts of that that are very intriguing, I think the part that keeps me in the private is the fact that I work specifically for the individual and what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
I have no outside influence telling me that I need to do it this way or that way. And also, it's like some of that stuff. I mean, I think guys like certain stuff to be done behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're that way too, right? Where
No
it's
doubt.
like you have some pretty exclusive clientele that it's like, it's not to say that you don't walk around with them and you could be seen with them or whatever, but you're not necessarily just blasting out like, hey, I did this and I did that. And it's like, no, that's just tends to be
Yeah.
different than how we do it, right? Where it's like we're okay being in the background and letting that be the thing in the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards you, because I feel as an artist in my own self, like that's what's always made my work so passionate. Like that's what's driven all of my work. I'm obsessed with the unknown and the potential of humanity, and that's where I get all my stuff from nature. It's what you were saying. That's why, like, right when you started talking about the trees and the complexity, my brain just starts going to that. But one of the things that I think that's hard in our positions when you work with people is you can have such these like incredible environments that you can kind of go up into Sedona, or you can do certain things, or you can create different structures to kind of explore oneself, and you can be a guide. I consider myself like a medium to space, right? Like my job is to withhold the integrity for the space and learn who's in it. And I create all these little things that allow that person to explore who they are. And and that's kind of is what it is. But then the hard part is like, and I was in it, we've been in it. and a lot of people we work with are in it. They go from that and they go into a system that is massive structure. It is hugely corporate. It is all certain driven. I mean, what's just your view? What's your viewpoint on how athletes manage both? Because I got to imagine if an athlete goes and works with you, and we're kind of talking about that, but then they do put on a jersey and a uniform, play a character for an org, and they're in a wide with hundreds of people, all number, data, analytical, etc., and it's all through hierarchy. So it's like, how do you help athletes balance the two?
I mean, I think that's different for each guy, and it's different for each org, as you know, because
Yeah.
they do it different ways. But I think of it, I mean, almost like you're gonna make pasta
Mm-hmm.
and you drain out the water
Mm-hmm.
and you the pasta where it's like, let's say the pasta is what's important to that individual,
Okay.
where it's like certain pitchers like to see certain things. Let's say a guy likes to see side angle of his video.
Sure.
Well, another guy might not ever want to see a side angle of his video.
Mm.
He might only want to see from behind or from the front, or so it's like I think we have to define what's important for that individual and then kind of go from there. And then I think a lot of times how I can help is to be a translator.
Mm. Go deeper into that.
So it's like, so they're getting this information,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like you said, a medium, and I'm in the middle, and I can take this information and be like, okay, well, this means this for you.
Hmm.
And I think it's important as a coach to teach cause and effect,
Hmm.
and it's kind of nudging a guy this way and this way. It's not just like this is your path, stay on this path, because
Yeah.
you've been on hikes. How many hikes do you go on that it's a straight path?
Never.
No, man. I
Yeah.
mean, and you might find different. One of my favorite hikes in Sedona is Bell Rock, and I
Oh,
call it
beautiful.
twisted roots,
Yeah.
right? Because if you follow the path that I follow,
Yeah.
every time you turn, there's a tree with twisted roots, which is the vortexes and the different
Yeah.
energies that are out there, right?
Yeah.
If you know what you're looking for, like with the twisted roots, then you can see them. But if you're unaware and you're just seeing all these trees or the rocks, you can kind of get lost. So I'd say that's the same thing with the numbers, the mechanics, all the different stuff where it's like, well, what applies to me?
Hmm.
And I'd say what applies to me when I'm misfiring versus when I'm peak performing. And then being able to kind of nudge from here to get you back to more of the peak.
I love that. I mean, you think of it as like the uniqueness of a big leaguer kind of finds that in a way, right? They kind of find what that is for them, and that's what makes them successful and unique. But what happens in the mass majority of like minor leagues? You have 100+ guys in the minor leagues. It's not as acceptable to move outside of the system that's in front of you or the curriculum, we'll say. And then it's even harder in college. I haven't been in college in a while, but it was really hard in college. When I was in college, you like did this, right? And then I've even breaking it down even younger. You go high school and youth. I did a piece on this actually a few months ago about when my youth teams that I played on, we had the exact same throwing mechanics. All of us had to do them. So it was like we all had to do the system in the curriculum. But so it kind of like disappears once you're the best. But on the way to that, it's not. It's all curriculum based. And what's your thoughts around that?
That's awesome. Well, I think it's a lot like a box, right? It's
Yeah.
like we all try to get where we have these characteristics that get us in this box, but then like you looked at the originality of the big leaguers, like you're saying, they're the guys that are on the outside of the box. They're not the guys that are right in the middle of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yes, and I see this at the high school level too, because it's like we'll see kids that, let's say I go to a big league game and I see how easy they make it look,
Yeah.
right? You go out there, they're doing this, and then you see a kid come back to high school and he tries to act like that with the probably being unaware of what it took to become that, or
Mm-hmm.
the steps that it took to maybe weed out those things that were different than that. But a lot of times when I first start with a client, it could be a little kid, could be a major leaguer. I tell him it's like the statue of David that Michelangelo carved.
Hmm.
He never added anything to it. All he did is chisel away that which was not that. And
Mhm.
then he'd sandpaper that which was not that.
Mhm.
And he'd come in and remove versus adding. So I think a lot of times that could be, yes, we add structure, like a daily structure, like make
Yeah.
your bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing how that can start, right?
Right.
Something like that. Or, hey, put your dishes away.
Yeah.
Or, little things where you take responsibilities for things. But then it starts to trickle over versus, like, I think if you go watch, guys that make it look really easy, you might think, oh, I'm just going to nonchalant it. And it's like, it looks nonchalant because they're so dang efficient. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're not, because I think a lot of times too, you go watch a game and it's one of the things I talk to the infielders a lot about is like that timing of, you go watch a good infielder right as the ball crosses home plate, they're anticipating something.
Hmm.
Right. And they're not anticipating a ball that's just right at them. They're anticipating something that gives them more bandwidth.
Hmm.
It gives them the ability to react in a different way. But it wasn't just the reaction, it was actually the anticipation that allowed that reaction to happen.
Hmm. I
And I
love.
think
Yeah. Go ahead.
the longer you do it, you start to build those anticipations and you can start to see things before they happen. And I think that's when people, if you were to sit and watch a game with, you or I'm sure you'd sit there and it's like you could say something's going to happen before it happens because you anticipated it
Right.
versus like other guys might just surprise them. And then, it's a game of inches and they're off by this much versus like the other guy that.
How much of lifestyle do you think impacts performance? So nothing that perceivably seems to matter at all for baseball. So like making your bed or washing the dishes, but like in general.
I mean, I think the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
And the game will expose you.
Hmm.
And that's typically what I like to tell people is like the game knows, and you know this because you've played the game enough,
Yeah.
where it's like if there's something you skipped,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. Like the other day, and this is hilarious. You'll laugh at this.
Yeah.
I'm 45 years old, played a lot of baseball games, countless. I go out to pitch, and of course I get a comebacker,
Yeah. Why not?
right? And it's not to say I hadn't taken, some ground balls or whatever, right? But it
Yeah.
was like just the fact that it's like the game will always test you and it'll always find you. And it's like I think I think there's a certain beauty to that, and it's kind of in that unknown, right? Where it's like, okay, how does that happen? But it's also pretty known.
The game is
Like
so
what you put in,
fascinating.
what you get out. But it's a very funny game like that, and it's people that are in it, they know it. Where it's like, okay, I've watched however many games in my life, I've never seen two unfold exactly the same. I've never seen two that I can just walk out there and predict what's going to happen before it happens.
Right.
And I think that's what keeps a guy like me coming back, because it's like the only thing I know is that I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of hear what I'm hearing. It's hard for me because I filter so much stuff through philosophy, right? And or even law of attraction in those systems. It's like, the lesson of the Tao is like what's inside is what you see outside type deal, and they work off each other. So when you think of it, it's like the anticipation or understanding the anticipation of something within a game can be based off of your how you do anything is how you do everything type deal, your habitual lifestyle. And then as you master those disciplines, you sort of have this like freedom, from what I'm hearing you say, to anticipate something that you can somewhat know is going to take place. But then the irony of it is like what you just said. Like no game is ever ends the same. One of the things I've always thought about in sport in comparison to other entertainment industry is that you kind of know how every movie is going to end, no matter what. Like a rom-com is going to be the same. Might have some different characters, different background, whatever, but it's going to have the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's always going to end the same. A sports event, baseball specifically, it happens in spontaneity, which is why I find so much love in the art of it, because they're making art in real time. And that's where this back half of that is what you're saying. It's like you have this preparation that sort of controls you a little bit in the chaos. You have a little bit of order, but the chaos is inevitable. That's the experience you just had. Like no matter what, it's inevitably happening every game. Which is that? Do you feel like that is part of the relationship of how it keeps bringing you back? Is that experiencing the
So,
regularity of the chaos?
well, then I think too, it's like, so let's take it to training where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm training a kid,
Yeah.
and how do we train this? Because it is completely random, although we do kind of have an idea.
Yeah.
So to me as a pitcher, it always comes down to your pre-pitch, so your breath, your pre-pitch, and we talked about this when you were here.
Yeah.
But then after that pitch too, it's got to be what I call the 3-second rule.
Okay.
So after you throw the ball for 3 seconds, you act like it went exactly where you wanted it to.
Mm.
Even in reality, we know that the average miss in the big league last year was over 14 inches, right? Which is mind blowing if you get into that too.
Yeah, that's
But
incredible.
a good pitcher acts like he threw it there on purpose. His body language, his mound presence, if you will,
Yeah.
stays the same. And then he pitches off the mistake, not the intended pitch,
So
right? You call fastball away, I miss fastball in. I'm not going to throw a breaking ball off of the fastball away. I'm going to throw a breaking ball off the fastball that was in.
So you're saying every pitch, perceivably, you were you were right. Is how I heard that.
You act that way because if you don't, like the easiest one I think is, let's say fastball inside.
Yeah.
You're a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
I buzz you in. If I look down, did I do it on purpose? Probably not. Right. But if I look in there and I'm not saying being a dingbat,
No, I know what
but
you're
I'm
saying.
like, I'm looking like I did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, now I can pitch off of that versus if I cower or I look down and I act like I didn't do it on purpose. Now all of a sudden, you're probably digging in like a shark and just dropped some blood in the water.
Yeah. Well, I love.
And you can read that, right?
Yeah.
Guys you faced, right? Where it's like they give you confidence by the way they're acting versus a guy that's out there that if he acts like he did it on purpose, you don't know. And then you don't know what's coming. That sucks, right? Like you're standing in the box and you're like, he might have just thrown it at my face on purpose. That's weird. Or he might have just bounced that one in the dirt and he just acted like he did it on purpose. Did he? Versus like you see a young kid all the time and it's like you can tell if they threw a good pitch or not. I didn't even see the pitch.
Right. Right. I love how you're talking. I love how you bounce the next pitch off of that though too. If I'm trying to go low and away, but I miss high and in, but I'm playing the way I heard it is I'm playing the game as every pitch is what it's supposed to be, and I'm maneuvering off of that pitch, right? Instead of that in and of itself has to have a massive degree of confidence. I mean, to be able to do what you're talking about in actuality, to be able to maintain that for a game, if you're a starter, let's say, I mean, you got to be a confident dude.
It's hard to do. Yeah. It's hard to do because and I think it takes practice to do that, and especially the body language where it's like, okay, did you do that on purpose?
Mm-hmm.
It's typically how I'll ask it, where it's like, instead of saying you didn't do that on purpose because I saw it, put it in their boat again, where it's like, did you do that on purpose?
Sure.
Did you act like you did that on purpose?
What do you get for responses on that? I mean, it can be from all the ages that you work with.
I mean, it's usually pretty it's like a aha moment for them. Where it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And then the funny part is, especially with young guys, if we're talking delivery work, all of a sudden they start following the 3-second rule. Well, what happens when our head stays up? What happens when we stand confident?
Yeah.
All of a sudden the outside looks better because the inside's better.
Right.
Versus, I think a lot of times, I mean, you might see, it's like we've all been around the big dude that's loud and whatever, and he's probably the least scary guy ever because that all that big blah 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 is nothing. Versus you're hanging out with somebody who's like, the quiet one, and you're like, oh, we always heard it, but watch out for the quiet one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think as a pitcher, it's that same thing where it's like, if we project confidence, it makes it harder to hit off us. And you could flip the switch, right? I'm just on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But same thing with a good hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you can feel a guy in the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there's certain, you can feel their energy when they're in the box, right? I had a kid who he was facing some of our pro guys the other day, and he's coming from college trying to go pro ball, and he's
Sure.
like, dude, I can feel him in the box.
It's the
And I'd be
worst
like, yeah,
feeling
that's
ever.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool,
But
but
it's cool,
it
right?
is
Because
very
it's
cool.
like, okay, so it's more than what we see. It's like the same thing. You go into the forest, and it's like it's a vibration. It's not just the sight and the sight of it. Like, yeah, I can look at a picture of the forest, and that's a good start.
Sure.
Or I love nature sounds, right? I listen to nature sounds and do some different stuff, but to go be in that and have it 360 degrees around you is different than the other.
Yeah, you feel it, right? I mean, that's the exact example you just gave. You feel it. Kyle Schwarber was the that was the moment I faced him in pro ball. I knew I'd never make it to the big leagues because boy, could I feel him. And it was horrific to feel his energy. I knew I wasn't going to be able to withstand that, which is a great, it makes me think about that when you say that. Well, how do
Well,
you,
I faced Aaron Judge that year in the Florida State League, and I remember, and I'm like, and it was a day I think I punched out 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 or something. I was feeling good, and he spit on a 3-2 slider, and he was obviously a large human, but there
yeah,
was something where I was like, ooh, that's different, because most guys couldn't just spit on my slider like that, and it was 3-2, and he did take it like a good take, but he still spit.
yeah, that's funny. So Kyle Schwarber, I went, I don't know, I'm like a 93, 94 mile an hour two seamer in on a lefty that was like an inch or two off the plate. And it was like just from a righty, I was a righty, but to like run a two seamer in at 94 on a lefty right off the plate, like that's like a powerful pitch, right? To be able to do that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this dude, yeah, I remember this dude didn't even flirt with swinging at it. And he just stepped out of the box and looked at the coach down the third baseline for the next sign. Like it was like nothing. And I was like, that's by far the best pitch I can make. And this guy didn't even have this guy didn't even know it happened. And it's the same example that you just had right there. Do you find as much joy? What's the relationship with joy and love of the artistic side of baseball with you in the position of coach and player? Because I find that really unique that you still experience both.
I mean, I'd say as a coach, it comes more in terms of when they have like an aha moment,
Mm-hmm.
and you can kind of see them putting things together, and then it's like the joy of like, okay, we kind of helped, not necessarily spoon feed them, but we kind of helped nudge them in that direction, if you will.
Yeah.
But then they got it, right? It's
Yeah.
different than like we gave them the answer. It's like when they got it. And I think as a player, a lot of times I have more fire in my joy, I would say.
Sure. Yeah.
Like as a coach, you can observe a heck of a lot more.
Yeah.
As a player, I've learned to observe in between innings, where it's like I was taught. I used to have trouble coming from. I was more of a closer, late inning guy. I'd have trouble going multiple innings in relief.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd come in on second and third and just, and then I go back out for the next inning, and it was like there's nothing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there.
So what I learned was from a guy, Travis Hughes, who was one of my teammates in Calgary. But he was like, when he was with the Yankees, they taught him with 2 outs to close his eyes and see each one of his pitches for a called strike, and then each one of his pitches for a swing and miss. Righty and lefty, and you just kind of go through that. And that helped to kind of put me in that observer headspace where I'm sitting there. But then when you go out there, it was like you were almost out of your body.
Mm.
And I think those are my best games ever. They call them white moments. I think a lot of times, but it was like I saw shadows more than anything. So I would see the holes in the back of the catcher's mitt.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is more of like a shadow versus like, I didn't see like a pinpoint hole. It was like, no, I more saw the depth of it.
Yeah, I just watched For Love of the Game last night. When he says clear the mechanism. Do you find
kind of like that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you feel a relationship to that? Like, is what you know what I mean?
I do.
Do you think that that's
Because
a
it's kind of that noise too, where it's
right?
like instead of hearing like specific, it's more like a buzz. It's more like a hum or like a, if you do frequencies, so
Yeah,
it's like it's more of like it's a instead of like a
yeah,
when you're in that zone, you can lower it, more grounding.
yeah. What do you think that? Do you? I mean, I've thought about that my whole life. Do you think that you can? Do you think that you can Do you think you can make that state happen, or do you think that you live that state and then you experience it in these minute times in a game?
I mean, I think for myself, it's when I'm fully right where my feet are at
Mm-hmm.
that I'm in those moments. So it could be on the field, could be off the field. I mean, and you've seen me a lot of times on bare feet, where
Yep.
it's like I like to be literally right where my feet are at.
Yep.
But when I pitch like that too, it's yes, there's kind of I guess a state that's create for me. It was my breath.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught a half breath method by a guy when I was about 23. That kind of changed a lot for me. But I would breathe in through my feet
Mm.
and then breathe calm water up to the top of my head. And then I would exhale the fire down in my belly. And then for me, things got really quiet once my exhale got to about my belly button.
Mm.
And I'm sure nervous system wise, you could tell me exactly what that does. But another thing with guys, like I tell them to breathe through their balls,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Yeah.
it's a physiological thing, right? But at the same time, it's like it's allowing me to go.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden, there's this quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was like I never had to think about throwing the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
If I had that breath, it was like the pitch automatically happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was like autopilot. I became this flow, and it just yes, I could create it a little bit with my breath, but I wasn't necessarily creating. I think I was allowing it with
Mm.
my breath.
That's powerful right there, the allowing. Because we get in our own way, right? I mean, we're the ones that try to I like how you used no thought in that because when I was a player, one of the things that changed with me that turned into my living, which made breathing so peculiar to me, I suppose, was that at least I don't know, I don't really study the curriculum currently of mental skills in baseball specifically, but at least when I was playing 10 plus years ago, it was always about thoughts, right? Like you spend a significant amount of time thinking about your thinking in performance. And
Huh.
and it was counterproductive to me because when I found when my career was over, which I think that there was a meaning for this, but I actually found the opposite. I found what you were saying. I found, and that was what I fell in love with breathing because that became physiology first to me, and I felt like a lot of the mental skills curriculums then was psychology first, and that's where I thought
Hmm.
was the misuse because of what you just said. Because you can't think yourself into the thing, you can be and allow yourself into the thing, and that's where breathing made so much sense because now all of a sudden I can tangibly influence the breath, like you just said. Like if you're bringing it up from your nuts, I mean that's your root, right? That's your chakra. That's the stability of your entire being. So if I funnel that energy all the way up the system, up towards the crown and the head, and all of a sudden, like I can allow the situation. And you're not in thought because you're in your being, you're in your physiology. And that was where I thought we missed as an industry. Like I said, I don't know, I don't study what the curriculums are today necessarily. I don't know where they're at with that philosophy, but that was like a paradox to me when I played because I felt like that actually hurt me a lot. Is that the mental skills training was so thought heavy instead of physiology heavy. And everything you just said is physiology first. Like you're working your physiology here. It's hard to process thinking when you're doing that.
When I think it's also like some of that stuff's impossible to create, right? Where it's like we'll see certain guys that throw really hard in practice,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go in a game and they throw slower.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see other guys, and this is the way I was never thinking about velocity in my bullpens,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was probably throwing 85 to 87,
Yeah.
but then I'd go in the game. And because I wasn't thinking about velocity, I was actually thinking about getting out
Yeah.
and executing pitches, one pitch at a time. It allowed me to have that velocity because I was just in that movement, allowing it to be versus I see a lot of guys in like tryout situations, or, hey, we got scouts out and there's certain stuff, and it's like, now they got the juice. And then they're like, well, how do we create that?
Yeah.
There's no creating it. Like
It is.
it is what it is.
It is
If
what
I'm
it
in the
is.
desert, I'm not going to create water.
Right.
If I go to the ocean, I'm not going to create a desert.
Right.
I mean, there's just certain places that certain things happen. So I think if we allow things to be what they are, I think it gives us a lot more power in those moments versus if we're trying to create things that are absent in that moment.
Well, that's why I still think it's so cool that you compete, because how many 45-year-old coaches compete as a player as well, right? You think of it as, I don't know why this is coming to me now, but it feels like this is across all sports, because that's kind of the thing, right? You always think like practice what you preach. And it's really interesting to me as it's literally happening right now as I'm saying it. Like, I don't really know anybody who is still practicing the thing they're preaching in their 40s most of the time. It's something that.
Okay, so I completely agree. And my lens on it kind of changed. Let's think martial arts.
Okay.
So if I'm going to learn martial arts from somebody, should I be able to kick their ass when I meet them?
I would assume, yeah, right? Or no,
Well,
no,
I would say
you
no.
shouldn't.
Like
You
I
shouldn't.
don't
Yeah,
want
sorry,
to.
you
Yeah, I don't
shouldn't.
want to learn from somebody if I can just walk up and kick their
Yeah,
ass. Like I want
they
to
should
learn.
be able to beat you. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. Same page. But I think that's when it kind of flipped for me as a ball player too, where I'm like, okay, and I call them bucket coaches, and I'm not necessarily trying to label anybody
Right.
here, but I mean, there's a lot of guys that love to sit and talk about when they played, and they love to. I mean, we all know these people, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The people that sit on a bucket and tell you it's like the armchair quarterback in the NFL. You hear guys all the time. They sit back and, oh, you should have done this, or you go to a establishment and there's a fight on the TV, a boxing match or something, and you got some dude saying what he should, oh, he should have done this, this, and this, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, get in there and
Right.
get in that moment and see what happens. But I think it goes all the way back to in the arena, the Theodore Roosevelt poem that he wrote or whatever, where it's like, I think a lot of times as coaches we get removed and we're sitting back, and it can sound like we make it really easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all you got to do is, I mean, wall ball to me is the ultimate humbler. If I could take any coach out there that's sitting there and just making let's say their third baseman scared to make a play, which I hate. I threw sinkers. I love my third baseman. But I want that guy confident. But how about if that coach went and threw 5 balls against the wall and tried to field them himself?
Right.
It's going to remind him real quick that there's a lot more going on than just, man up, or, whatever the phrase is that we want to tell these kids. It's like, no, there's a confidence involved here. And you're breaking their confidence versus building their confidence in being the bucket coach versus like, you swing it back to the martial arts, right? If I walked into a martial arts studio and I could just hand the guy his shirt, then that's not the guy.
Right. It's not the guy.
But if you can walk in there, it's like that guy can wash the floor. Like my seafood could probably, 72 different ways he could take me down.
Yeah.
Turn me into a pretzel. That's the guy I want to learn from.
You've been in the game a lot closer than I. Even though I was in the game the last couple of years professionally, I was in a medical staff, right? I wasn't on a coaching side. I don't know where my face just went, but you can still hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Did my face just shoot out on yours?
It was it's a green flash for a second, and now it's just a dark screen.
Well, as long as you can still hear me.
Yes, sir.
We're just going to keep rolling with it, but it's just going to be a your face show for right now.
Oh, man.
Hang in there with me. But I want to keep on this thought because I haven't been on the coaching side, right? I'm not like coaching baseball. I'm not trying to coach pitching later today is where I'm going with this. But in the game, I've been in the game my whole life. Do you think that because of what's your what's your perspective over the last 20, 25, 30 years of where the game has shifted to not recognizing this artistic, interpersonal personality side, and we've driven it to the gatekeeping of, okay, this is what you are. Because that's what I found a lot in the last couple of years when I was just watching from the side. It was like we tell players who they are. And that's kind of where I think even like the armchair example is great, but I do think we're even doing that in the game. But how the game has sort of evolved from your point of view and being in it, like what has if you could think of it in like 5-year increments, do you think that we've just done that naturally, or has it always been somewhat like that of what you're saying?
I think part of it is perhaps the human nature of it, but like continuing to try to make something better,
Mm-hmm.
or like we think that there's this new way, or I get stuff all the time. People reach out and be like, "Hey, you should see this brand new whatever way of training,"
Yeah.
and then I'll see it, and I'm like, "We did that 20 years ago."
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that they're wrong. It's just because it's new to them, it's flashy and new. But if you're with the guys that have been doing it, it's nothing new. It's just a new way to say it. It's a new way to market it. It's a new way to, I guess, bring it about. And I think a big piece that's missing is when guys would pass things down, through, let's say, stories,
Okay.
or I think there's a big piece missing with a lot of the veterans. I think there's a lot of stuff where we're enamored with some of the stuff that new guys can do that we lose. It's like, let's talk about the sweeping slider, for example.
Yeah.
You think nobody ever threw a sweeper? Like, look back at, you remember Dave Steeb? He threw one of the nastiest sliders in the whole wide world, and we just called it a slider.
Right.
Or like steam shift, right? Like, we like to name things. There's these certain things. It's like, we did steam shift 20 years ago. We didn't call it steam shift. We watched how the ball spun. You draw a little dot on it, you can see it,
Yeah.
right? You don't need a machine to tell you that. And I think some of the value that's came from the science is very good, but I think it ultimately needs to get broken back down for the athlete in something that's digestible. Where it's like, if you said, like, we're labeling guys, or let's say, I know that your fastball has this metric, your slider has this metric, your changeup has this metric. You're still a human. You're not a robot that just spits them out the same every time.
Right.
There's some variability. And I think, for me as a coach, I like to teach cause and effect.
Yep.
If I can teach you how to make little sandpaper adjustments in the game, that's where my value lies, versus like me sitting back here and like, giving you a tip or a cue or whatever. And I think the computers and the videos is good, but at the same time, we see ourselves compared to somebody else.
Mm.
And I think that's where stuff gets lost. I think that's where we lose uniqueness, is when we start to bucket guys and be like, oh, well, this guy throws like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, he might, but also that guy is only that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met him ever, whoever he is.
How have you, because this even goes back to when you made it into when you signed with Milwaukee when you were 34 years old. Something for me, I think that I'm like quickly learning, admiring about you is just your ability to sustain the love for the art. But it's not, that's too surface for what it really is. Like, it just is, and this is such a short time. So it's like, again, this is just me, what I'm feeling off you. But you've sustained your pursuit towards being who you are. And I would imagine that lifelong process has been a lot of hard times too, right? Like, even when you told me, what'd you do, play 11 years of indie ball before you signed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in between.
Yeah, so let me work through this for a second. I mean, in reality, like that in society, like influence of society, I would imagine friends, like that's like so against the grain of what you're supposed to do, right? And then even now, talking about playing, and when I was with you, you were even you're going to play overseas potentially, right? I don't want to expose that. I don't know, but
Uh-huh.
wherever that is. So you're still
Yeah,
potentially,
that's training.
yeah. So I mean, like, wherever that goes, what I'm trying to say in a very respectful and awesome way that I admire is a lot of the things that again gravitate toward me to you is because you go against conformity. Like you're a nonconformist, but it's not a nonconformity of like trying, like doesn't feel like I'm intentionally trying to be this nonconformist because I don't love the conformity of the world. It just feels like you're a nonconformist because you're just interested in figuring out who you are. And that inevitably makes you a nonconformist. And again, I wasn't with you. I didn't know you then. I'm just getting to know you now. But someone who signed to play high A ball as a 34-year-old, that's against anything that seems rational in society. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
yeah,
It's
just as like you're as a fast friend of mine, that's so cool to me. But there's no way that's been like an easy thing to be able to stand up for what you love, stand up for what you believe in, stand up for who you are. So like, what is that? What's that like? What does that feel like when you're hearing me say that? Because you're the one living it. I'm just here witnessing it from an observation view.
I think it's typically like a lot of things in life where it's like people see the tip of the iceberg, they see what's above the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't get to see what's below the surface. They don't see the struggle, the yeah, I mean, I guess all the stuff that you have to do to get to that point. I mean, I got in a car accident in 2015 that made me stop playing, and my biggest coping mechanism is pouring into other people.
Hmm.
So like instead of me sitting back and I could have very easily just disappeared from everything after that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was definitely a part of me that would have been very okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of it was just that's not okay because it can't be about me. It has to be about continuing to help and continuing to allow others to live their dreams. Because I mean, yeah, I didn't pitch in the big leagues. Everybody thinks I pitched in the big leagues. I talk to guys all the time. They're like, "You're a big leaguer." I'm like, "No, I'm not." I never pitched in the big league. I've coached over 250 major leaguers.
Mm-hmm.
Other guys that have that time, but I will never call myself a big leaguer unless I play in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. But I think a lot of the struggle has given me a unique lens that's hard to share.
I'd imagine.
I feel like a lot of times it's like you have to almost dress it up so that people can understand it. Because to understand all that struggle and failure would make it hard to think that something's still moving forward. But it's continued to move forward, and it's been more than just myself, but it's it's this whole tribe of guys, the Fuel Factory family we call them, but it's like these guys pouring into them has allowed me the space to get back to being an athlete again too, I think.
Do you still have aspirations of being a big leaguer?
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
I still have that. I literally have dreams at night about it,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
which is weird, but it is what it is, and it's unexplainable.
right. Well, I think that's why you said like you try to dress it up, right? Like you try to put it in articulation, but it's like, can you? Can you actually explain the feeling that you have?
I mean, even right there, no. I mean, there are words. Now I could show you,
Right.
right? If you were to come and check out like we did, we were to hang out and do a day, you'd be like, oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not a big words guy, as I'm staring at your book right here that says without words.
Yeah. Well, that's the fascination. That to me is what makes humans so interesting, and that's why I asked you that after originally the gatekeeping question of information or trying to tell people who they are, because that really bothered me over the last couple of years, and I'm an artist in my own way, and my expression came out in writing that book because I was so I was so hard on trying to figure out how to tell people stuff all the time that I wanted to see changed in the game. And it was like the biggest lesson for myself because it was, well, this is without words. Like you cannot tell, you can put all the data into a baseball game. You do not know who's going to win that baseball game. Like you do not know.
You can even load it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Dodgers have one of the best rosters we've ever seen in the history of the game. You don't see the other teams mailing in the chips.
Right. And,
Right? No, they want to beat them.
exactly. And it's the same thing. It's like, how do you explain who you are, right? The way I started that book was with the question, who am I? And I said there's two types of people. One definitively answers that and the other person contemplates. And it's like that in and of itself is a really fun rabbit hole to go down. But I think that's what's so intriguing to me about you. And I think, like, let me phrase this question in a different way to maybe find some words. How has obviously your philosophy for life has been formed through your pursuit. So it's like, if you were to view like going out to nature with those guys, or thinking people, or learning people where they're at, studying things your own self, having the love for it, having the passion, what is just your feeling towards art in general, or your philosophy of just living based on using your own avenues, because your avenue's unique to yourself, but how is that avenue formed the Fuel Factory family, or the energy of pouring into other people, or the joy of the game? Because it sounds, all these things, it sounds like baseball is essentially just this, it's like this platform that you and a bunch of other people get to just express who they are, and you're essentially just allowing people to be free while they're doing that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I had to put it to words, I mean, I think a lot of it, what brings me back is the challenge of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like the unknown part is part of the beauty of it. I think the fact that you can't define it is part of what makes it beautiful too. Like the lack of words that could actually fully wrap it up. I think the unique perspective that we get to have from it can change on a daily basis too. Like if we're gonna teach that each pitch is a new game, how does that influence life?
Yeah.
Like each moment I'm in, like for example, got to coach a guy, last year that won a Cy Young Award last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I have certain people who will hit me up, and like that moment cannot define what we do, like we were talking about earlier, right? And it's not the motivation behind what we do.
Right.
But at the same time, if I go to New York and I get to go spend some time with that guy, or I come back and I hang out with a 12-year-old. If I'm only having fun doing this one and not this one, then to me, I've lost the art.
Well said.
Because I think, and I think from moment to moment, we could go this way too, where it's like, okay, I played 13 professional seasons. I had seasons that were really good. I had seasons that maybe were not as good. But I think looking back, a lot of times those are the years that taught me more.
Sure.
Where it's like those difficult moments. I mean, I remember, for whatever reason, I'm getting goosebumps right now,
Yeah.
but there was a game 7 that we lost in the playoffs, and I can remember like literally not a dry eye in the clubhouse, right? And you have seasons like that where it's like it just exhausts you, and but at the end of the day, when you look back on those, it's like you gave everything you had, and I think at the end of the day, you may have a hard time defining who you are in that moment, but I think it can show you who you were in that moment.
Mm.
And then if who you were in that moment, you can learn from that, versus like if you attach yourself to the outcome of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I think like for me, allowing myself to go through certain experiences that I've been through, and how do I move forward from that versus allowing it to crush me. Because I think there were certain, moments in my career that could have crushed me and ended all of the stuff we're talking about, the
Yeah.
joy, the love, that could have happened, versus I think allowing kind of the observer in me to say what was right about that situation, instead of, I think a lot of times it's very easy in this world to see what's wrong about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it might be 99% wrong, but if you can cling to that 1%, you have something to move forward to.
I absolutely love the fact that you talked about maintaining the art of kind of going in and out of those states, because what's your take on this? Because I saw a lot of this work, I've seen a lot of this working with athletes, and this happened to me as an athlete. But the glamour, the materialism of the New York example is so loud, and there's so many things involved in Major League Baseball with money and status and entertainment, and it's so ingrained in society. You know, if you're just talking again to both sides of the coin, how do you maintain, or how do you hold down the perspective to carry the art in the glitter? And a lot of times I mean, I'm sure we see it all the time. And I was guilty of this as a player too. I remember the first time when I went to spring training, I saw the Milwaukee Brewers logo, and I couldn't perform because I had all the major league logos on me. And the whole day, instead of working on my craft, I couldn't stop seeing the M on my jersey. Like, I felt like it was so cool that I had the new era fit on, and etc. Now looking back at that, I've had years to reflect on that, and that could have been a very easy tell that I was not going to make it to the big leagues. But to maintain that perspective of going in and out of extreme materialism and then coming back down to this art, or however you want to frame that, what are some of the ways that you help athletes work through that?
That's really good. I mean, I would say a lot of this is going to come from the lens that you see guys at too,
Mm-hmm.
where, obviously, I mean, I've got to coach some pretty awesome dudes,
Yeah, you
right?
have.
And
Yeah.
if I only saw them for who they were, let's say on that stage, I think that would be lost. Versus, I've had a lot of guys come to me when they retire and want to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting crazy goosebumps again.
Yeah.
But those are some of the most powerful, life shaping things that I've been through. When you have grown ass men that have played a game their whole life, crying, showing different types of emotions when they flip that page or they go to that next chapter or however you want to call it. And I think being able to see, let's say, like the Bruce Wayne and the Batman,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
where it's like a lot of people are only going to see them as
Batman.
Batman.
Right.
And I've been fortunate enough to see these guys in their Bruce Wayne. And I've seen, I mean, you name it. The names are irrelevant here, but you see a kid who's in double A and hungry and searching for something. And then you see a guy who's in the big leagues as an all-star. To me, the value of our relationship doesn't change based on their performance.
Mm.
And I think the value of that human, to me, like the relationship is the most valuable thing to me as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, guys pay me money,
Yep.
right? Money pays my bills, but I've never been motivated by money,
Mm-hmm.
and I never will be. Just the way that I think, we all need it in a certain capacity to get by, but at the same time, it's like I think a lot of these guys, once they get up there, I think everybody's looking to take a piece
Mm-hmm.
and trying to take something from them, and it's like I think as a coach, a lot of times for me, I'm looking just to help them in that capacity versus like, yeah, I mean, you might have made $100 million in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Some people look at that as something. To me, there's something so much more there than just that shiny, whatever you want to call it at the end. There's the phrase of, and I think Yogi Berra is a guy who left a great blueprint for us in this, but they say he treated the janitor the same as he treated Derek Jeter.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, to me, if I'm talking to a guy that's at the peak of his performance and in his game right now, or I'm talking to somebody who's a beginner or somebody that's retired, and I think being able to have the value of that relationship kind of fill your soul versus this little temporary whatever might do.
100%. Did you have to form that perspective, and has it gotten, I would imagine it's only gotten better with having over hundreds of major league athletes. Was there, if you go back to the first 3 to 5 guys, or the first time you started realizing like, hey, I'm a pretty talent. I mean, you have a great reputation in Major League Baseball as a coach. There's many players who talk highly of you that I've met for years, right? Like you're known in those scenarios. I think that you hold that reputation outside of yourself, even from what you just said. But was there, when it, instead of being maybe Major League Baseball player 250, 251, what about Major League Baseball player 1, 2, and 3? Was there a time early in that where you had to be aware of holding that perspective that you just gave?
I think so, and I think some of it too came from seeing guys where they're at, like we talked about
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah.
where like you might see guys that are having just exceptional performance
Yeah.
at this, but then you see through your lens like the things that are maybe holding them back,
Yeah.
or you see the let's just say the human in them,
Yeah.
right? Like you see these guys on TV sometimes, it's like there's this incredible superhero robot, whatever persona you want to give it. And I think when you allow guys to be who they are, allow them to be who they are, but then also when you see them for who they are beyond just that glamour, I think that's kind of where and part of it probably came because I was in the clubhouse with some of these guys too,
Sure.
just like you were,
Yep.
where it's like, I mean, the Midwest League team I played on in Beloit, we had, I think, 11 guys make it to the big leagues. Prince
Wow.
Fielder, Ricky Week, Tony Gwynn Jr., Manny Parra, Dennis Sarfate. I mean, Craig Breslow. I mean, I could name you a whole bunch of guys that we were the minor league organization of the year. And then I got released in spring training.
Yeah.
Right now, just remember, I got released the last day of spring training. I
Hmm.
was completely shocked. Prince Fielder's the first guy I saw, and he's like, "We released you? Like, what are we doing here?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there, to kind of swing back to what we were talking about, I think there's a unique perspective that guys that have played the game have versus maybe guys who haven't played the game have.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain amount of respect for the guys who have came before me that allow me this kind of headspace, if you will.
Hmm.
Like guys like Tony Phillips was a big mentor of mine. Bob Welch is a guy who I got to spend some good time with. Guys that have had, I mean, shoot, 2 decades of
Right.
experience to share with a young guy like myself. But I think a lot of times what we noticed is that it's not the ability that keeps guys out, right? Like if you took a circle and you drew a circle around all these guys that had this ability and the few of them that get out, the reason they're making it is not because they're necessarily physically more talented. It was more something on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think that's what led me down a lot of the other avenues. Was I was hanging out with guys that maybe I had more of this and then they had more of that, and I'm like, okay, I could use some more of this in my life.
Sure.
And it was like I was taught early on where it's like, hey, if you don't like something, do something about it, right? Versus like if you're a tree, like, do you get to move? We're humans, right?
Yeah.
Like we get to move, we get to choose our environments. We get to, I mean, there's a reason I live in Arizona,
Hmm.
right? There's a reason I've chosen to live here versus other places.
Hmm.
Now I get to travel and do a lot of other cool stuff, but I like this as my home base. Part of that too is the desert allows, desert yetis like myself, but to kind of, like, if I want to disappear for a couple of days, it's pretty easy to disappear in
Yeah. Oh,
Phoenix.
yeah. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of baseball. It's like versus like if you're, maybe growing up where I grew up in a very small town, 30 people live there. It's a little different kind of yes, I could go into nature and disappear, but it's different than here where it's like you can just walk down the street and see whatever.
No doubt.
30 years, like, it's like you see Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a big city with lots of stuff, but it's like the idea of like small fish, big pond, or like big fish, big pond. Phoenix is a big pond, especially when it comes to baseball.
Yeah, it really is. I think about that a lot. I actually just talked about that on a show the other day because this is my first year at taking the plunge at being a snowbird. I've always wanted to be one. And
No,
yeah, I've always wanted to live in
looks good on you.
yeah, I appreciate it. But it's to what you're saying, it's largely because I think for me, I'm a writer, right? And I like doing podcasts like this, and then also I work with athletes. So it's like my athletes are in the major leagues and in the NHL. So it makes tons of sense for me to be in Arizona and in the winter and then be in Minnesota in the summer. And it's not like I did that over the last 3 months. Like I've been working on this for a decade, because I've been wanting to be in environments like you're talking about. And I think that environments for me, from the writing aspect, nature, and then the north, being in the north, being in Minnesota. Clearly, I don't love the heat of Arizona or the freezing cold of Minnesota. So that's like a personal preference, but it makes me think drastically different. When I'm in Arizona and I'm in the desert and I'm around people in that pocket of the world, and I'm always seeing people in LA or Malibu or going to San Diego, and then you're seeing the Scottsdale vibe. I've always asked myself, can I play in that game and then come up and play in this northern cabin game? And can I play this Minnesota game? Just intellectually, like, can I hold my own at the table has been the metaphor I've always challenged myself on. But it's similar to what you're saying. It's like you said, humans can move. And if you can pick up on things and observe things and step outside of it and look at what's serving you and what's not, I think you parlayed that beautifully as being a player, essentially, being a baseball player. And you were able to pick up on that. But and it's even funny because you said that earlier about how older guys maybe aren't passing down stories as much as they used to, or we weren't passing the torch in certain similar ways. And I think you said this, but this was one of the things that was going through my head. So much of what we're in now, and then we can start wrapping up, but it's like so much of where we're at now as a society, but then particularly in the game, is it's all information and data driven. And the irony of being radical through pure data is it doesn't move the needle in behavior, which was mind blowing to me over the last couple of years in the positions that I've had, because it's like, in the simple way of using your eyes around the country of this is we have more information now about health than we've ever had in the world, and we're extremely obese and unhealthy. So that alone goes to the point of the paradox in which we are not understanding that emotion still holds the governor of human behavior. So one of the ways that I've
And
talked
application,
an
right? You
application
have to be able to fly.
100%. So it's like you can have all the information in the world and all the data and all the analytics and tell a baseball player and gatekeep that and tell people who they are. But if you cannot tell stories or apply or create emotional connections or meet people where they're at, you cannot get behavioral changes or behavioral consistency or behavioral understanding. And it's weird that seems to me, it seems like that should seem incredibly simple, but it seems as if we've missed that tremendously. And again, I think kind of tying a bow on everything, I think and I'm learning this has been a very enjoyable thing to just listen to you talk. I think you're holding down the principles of that aggressively. And I felt that when I came and hung out with you the other day, is that I feel like you are sustaining these principles that keep us human. And you're also allowing the adaptation for what the game's going. But it's like, man, the simplest principles might be the hardest thing ever for us to be able to maintain as we move forward.
Well, how funny is that too, right? Or just the fact that that's weird.
Yeah, it's weird that it's weird.
Which makes it awesome. Yeah.
Well, dude, how do people? I mean, obviously, I'll pump it out a little bit too, but how do people find you? What's some of the stuff that you got going?
So on the social media world, I've got the Coach Zinger and Fuel Factory on the Instagram and the Twitter and I guess the Facebook world.
Mhm.
I think the best, and it's probably with you too. Like after reading your book, it's like it's awesome, but hanging out with you is even better. And we only got to hang out a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think the energy that you bring is what I was feeling, and what makes me want to hang out with you more. And
Likewise.
I want to jump into some of the, I mean, stuff we never even got to today, but some fun stuff with, I mean, sounds and frequencies, and how do we apply ways for guys to be able to tap into this a little bit here and there, right? Where it's some of the applications fairly simple,
Yeah.
but I think the hardest part is being consistent, like anything in life,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like if I can consistently do something like water, how the persistence of water allows something, just like a drop to affect everything else. And I think a lot of times I think guys look for a big fix, when I think a lot of times it's just one good decision leads to another good decision leads to another good decision. Just like it could go the other way, where it's like you give in.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start to learn how to give in, I think that's the biggest thing we need to stay away from. When you give in to things that in your innately in your soul that are correct and right, when you start to compromise, it gets very slippery.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, I think and this is where I'm challenged as well, is like, how do I continue to stay on this path, even though there's a lot of noise pulling it the other directions, and I think it's kind of like those cycles, but you continue to see things come back that have been here before, right? Like, did you make nature? Did I make nature?
Mm-mm.
We're part of nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
And its beauty is the part that's beyond us.
Mm.
And I think it's the part that keeps me intrigued too, where it's like anytime I need a reminder, all I have to do is go out in nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's being humbled or whether it's being sucked into and believing in, it's like the the place that we go up in Sedona is very special to me. But there's water there, there's mountains there, there's trees there. This place where you can go back and kind of find yourself,
Mm.
And I think in our game we have these rhythms that are unhealthy, right? Especially like the sleep. How many guys get a circadian rhythm?
None.
Right?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
But how do we adapt to that? And then how do we maybe potentially find ways to tap into that? And I think that's where guys like you and myself can help guys is, maybe you are in a hotel in New York, but how can you tap into this? How can you, take 5 minutes to work on your breath and do something? Or how can you listen to some sounds of nature, or tap into something that's already existing versus feeling like you have to create this yourself? It's like, no, it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Just how do you play to that?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you said it beautifully just now. It's beyond you, right? That's why I think I love how you said when you get back to nature, you reconnect in that humble state. But that goes back to what we were saying in the very beginning of this conversation. When you go beyond that, the shocking part is the creativity that comes to you. You essentially allow it to come to you. And I think that's where, to me, I just always think of it as my voice. Like I'm always trying to pursue to find more of my voice. Like, is this me? Is this what I'm saying? Is this who I am? And just pursuing the potential of finding my own voice. And I think that's where I think the transcendence of being a baseball player, specifically in the big leagues, which makes it so awesome, is that the stimulus is so high and the odds are so against you in terms of maintaining awareness and health and sustainability, that to me is everything you're saying. That's like the classroom to get it all out of you. Like you want all that. You want all the chaos and the disconnect from nature and the natural rhythms. I mean, you don't. It'd be nice to just hang out in Sedona, but the point is that
Well, pressure makes diamonds, right?
exactly,
Pressure makes
yeah.
diamonds.
And I think that's the cool.
And
I think that's the part that I think is cool about pursuing who you are at extreme high levels that guys that we get to know very well get to do. So
it's pretty awesome.
yeah, you're the man, dude. I hope I'm gonna still keep I'm gonna keep harping on you to get you up to Minnesota. I want to get you into some of these wood burning saunas. And then if I don't see you anytime soon, I know I'll be seeing you in the desert at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it'd be fun to come up there and do a camp
Yeah,
and the nature of the beast and allow people to tap into that,
no doubt.
you know. And I think just yeah, it excites me.
You're the man, dude. I appreciate you hanging out with me for a second. Why? Yeah. Cheers, folks. Enjoy the show. Hold on a second. This will upload for a second.